It was supposed to be a quiet Thursday morning in Eastwood, South Carolina, the kind of morning where the air feels a little heavier from the summer heat, and even the birds seem to sing slower. At the corner of Pine Street and Booker Avenue, traffic moved lazily. An old Ford Crown Victoria, dusty, dull blue, with the windows rolled down, idled outside Jefferson Bank. Behind the wheel sat a woman, small, frail-looking, probably in her late 70s. Skin as deep and warm as earth, framed by soft silver curls tucked under a cream-colored hat. Her name was Mrs. Eloise May Carter, and she wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She wasn't doing anything wrong. But a rookie patrol officer, Officer Jake Lorman, thought otherwise. He was tall, white, young, new to the force but already carrying himself like a sheriff from some old Western film. Aviator glasses, jaw clenched, one hand resting on his holster like it was muscle memory. He'd noticed her car parked a little close to the fire hydrant. Technically a violation, but in Eastwood no one cared, especially not for a woman who'd lived there longer than the police station itself. But Officer Lorman cared. Or maybe he just wanted to make a point. He strode up to the driver's side with that swagger. Tap, tap, tap on the window. Mrs. Carter turned her head slowly, rolled the window down a crack, and smiled the kind of smile only grandmothers seemed to master, warm but watchful. But, "Yes, sir," she said. Lorman didn't smile back. "I need you to move this vehicle right now, ma'am." She looked toward the hydrant, then back at him, calm. "I'm just waiting for the bank to open. I've got about 6 minutes. You're obstructing emergency access. Move it, now." "I've parked here every Thursday for the past 22 years, she said gently, "and I've never had a problem." That was the wrong answer. Lorman's voice rose just enough to turn heads from a nearby bakery. "You people think rules don't apply to you," he snapped. She blinked. A man exiting the bakery paused mid-step. A woman across the street reached for her phone. Mrs. Carter's hands stayed perfectly still on the steering wheel. "Excuse me?" she said, not angry, just disappointed. "I said," Lorman repeated louder this time, "you people always have some excuse. I don't care how long you've been here. Either move this car or I'll write you up. And don't play the age card either." The tension thickened, the kind of tension that only comes when history repeats itself in broad daylight. She could have driven off. She could have argued, but instead, she said nothing. For 10 seconds, she didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him with the quiet weight of 1,000 lived experiences behind her eyes. Then she reached into her purse. Lorman stiffened. "Ma'am, keep your hands where I can see them." Mrs. Carter didn't flinch. She pulled out a small leather-bound booklet. It looked old, worn, gold trim, faded with time. She opened it slowly, flipped to the first page, and held it out the window. Lorman glanced at it, clearly irritated, then froze. He leaned in, squinting at the embossed lettering. His face drained of color. The woman across the street lowered her phone. The man from the bakery whispered, "Wait, is that what I think it is?" Mrs. Carter still hadn't said a word, but the title on that page was clear. United States Federal Judge returning, Judge Eloise M. Carter. Lorman stepped back, 1 step, 2 steps. He cleared his throat. I didn't realize." That's when she finally spoke. 5 words, 5 simple words, but they hit like a hammer. "Now you know, carry on." And just like that, everything changed. Lorman's cheeks flushed red. He tried to regain control of the situation, but his voice cracked. "I didn't mean any disrespect, Judge Carter," he stammered, but the damage had been done. The woman from across the street was now filming. The man from the bakery had stepped off the curb, arms crossed, watching closely. And the people inside the bank, they were beginning to notice too. Mrs. Carter didn't move her car. She didn't need to. But Lorman wasn't finished. Not yet. He straightened his belt and took one last look at the booklet in her hands, as if hoping he had read it wrong. "That could be a fake," he muttered under his breath. Mrs. Carter turned her head. "Pardon?" "I said," he repeated louder this time, "anyone could get one of those printed online. You think I'm just going to walk away because you flashed some fancy ID?" The tension snapped like a rubber band. People gasped. A man walking his dog stopped in his tracks. Even the woman filming shook her head. "He really said that?" Mrs. Carter didn't react with rage. She didn't shout. She simply closed the booklet with a soft snap, placed it back into her purse, and rested both hands on the wheel again. Is there someone else I can speak to? She asked quietly. You're speaking to me, Lorman barked. And I'm telling you to move the damn car. Then I'd like to speak to your supervisor. Lorman's face twisted. Not how this works, lady. You don't get to pull rank out here. Lady. It wasn't just the word, it was how he said it. Sharp, condescending, like she didn't deserve her own name. That's when a voice came from the side. Excuse me, officer. It was the man from the bakery, middle-aged, Latino, apron still dusted with flour. She didn't do anything wrong. That car's been here every Thursday for as long as I've worked across the street. Lorman whipped around. You want to get involved too? The baker didn't flinch. I'm already involved, Beach. This is Eastwood. We look out for our elders here. A few more passers-by had stopped now. An elderly couple, a jogger, a teenager on a bike. The silent crowd was growing. And with every second, Lorman's voice grew louder. Back off, all of you. This is an active citation. Interfering with an officer is a chargeable offense. He was spiraling, losing the room. And then he reached for his ticket pad. Mrs. Carter watched quietly as he began writing. You're issuing a citation? She asked, her voice still calm. That's right, illegal parking, failure to comply, possible obstruction of emergency access. He slapped the ticket onto her windshield like it was a personal victory. Then he looked back at the crowd, daring them to say something. Mrs. Carter didn't move. She didn't need to, because someone else was already dialing a number. The teenager on the bike, he whispered to his phone, yeah, I need to report a situation with Officer Lorman. You're going to want to see this. Meanwhile, Lorman turned his back, walked back toward his cruiser. But then a second patrol car pulled up. Out stepped Sergeant Dana Mullins, older, sharper, experienced, and black. She'd gotten the call, and from the look on her face, she'd already been briefed. She approached the scene with deliberate steps. Report, she said simply. Lorman stood straight, shouting, illegal parking, refusal to comply. I issued a citation. Mullins looked past him, to Mrs. Carter, to the crowd, then back at him. You cited Judge Eloise Carter? Allegedly, Lorman said. She showed me a badge, but it could be fake. Mullins raised a hand. Stop. Silence. She walked slowly toward the car, nodded politely to Mrs. Carter, and asked, May I see it? Mrs. Carter handed over the booklet again. Mullins didn't need to open it. She already knew. She handed it back with both hands. Ma'am, she said with a respectful nod, I apologize for this. Entirely. Then she turned to Lorman, and everything in her posture changed. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Professional disappointment. Jake, she said, do you have any idea who you just screamed at in public? He swallowed hard. Retired federal judge, civil rights litigator, keynote speaker at last year's DOJ summit. Pause. Born and raised in Eastwood, one of the most respected women in this town. Long silence. Congratulations, she said flatly. You just wrote a ticket to a civil rights legend. Sergeant Mullins stood between Officer Lorman and the crowd, arms folded across her chest. Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice didn't waver. Jake, she said slowly, you need to think very carefully about what you say next. But Jake Lorman didn't. She parked illegally, he insisted. I was doing my job. I didn't care who she was. That's exactly the problem. Her voice cut through him. You didn't care who she was. You didn't ask. You saw a black woman in an old car and assumed disrespect. You barked orders. You raised your voice. You threatened her. Lorman's jaw twitched. I didn't threaten. You screamed in her face and accused her of faking her identity in front of half the town. A murmur spread through the growing crowd. Mrs. Carter still hadn't moved. She sat quietly in her seat, hands folded in her lap like a matriarch at Sunday service. But her silence wasn't weakness. It was power. Lorman shifted uncomfortably. So what, she gets a free pass because she's got some resume? Mullins turned slowly toward him. No, she said, she gets respect, like every other human being, like every elder in this community, and like every black woman who's had to put up with crap like this her entire life. Gasps from the crowd. Whispers turned into small nods. Phones were still recording. Then Lorman made his fatal mistake. You're defending her because you're one of them. One of them. The air turned to ice. Even the birds went silent. Mullins took one step forward. One of them? She repeated, her voice dropping to a whisper. Explain what you mean by that. He hesitated, mumbled. You know what I mean. No, she said, say it. Out loud. You said it in front of a retired judge, in front of your supervisor, in front of witnesses. You want to double down or walk away? He looked around, suddenly realizing there was no backing out now. The bakery owner took a step forward. Maybe it's time someone looks into his other stops, he said. I've seen him harass delivery guys in this neighborhood more than once. And my uncle, said the teenager, he got pulled over last week for looking suspicious outside the post office. My uncle's 73. More voices, more stories. They weren't just watching now, they were speaking. And Lorman, he was unraveling. This is ridiculous, he snapped. This is a witch hunt. No, Mullins replied. This is accountability. She stepped aside. You're suspended, effective immediately. Badge, gun, now. He didn't move. Now, officer. Lorman reached for his belt slowly, unhooked the badge, then the holstered firearm. He handed them over, fingers trembling. You'll be escorted off duty. An internal review starts today. Then with absolute calm, she turned back to Mrs. Carter. Ma'am, she said gently, do you wish to press charges? Mrs. Carter looked at her, then at the crowd. Her gaze landed on the teenager, the bakery owner, the elderly couple. No, she said softly, I want him to learn. Learn what, ma'am? Mullins asked respectfully. Mrs. Carter finally opened her door and stood, straight-backed, regal, commanding. She stepped forward, not toward Lorman, but toward the crowd. Then she turned to face them all. You don't fight hate with hate, she said, her voice low but unshakable. You fight it with truth, with dignity, with every inch of grace our ancestors bled for. Then she looked at Lorman and delivered the final blow. You raised your voice because you didn't know who I was. But now you do, and maybe next time you'll think twice before disrespecting someone who's done more for this country than you ever will. He stared at her, speechless. Mullins stepped back beside her, the contrast between the two women, a warrior in uniform and a judge in pearls, striking. The cameras were still rolling, and somewhere a headline was already being written. The suspension should have been the end of it, but it wasn't, because just when people thought the story had reached its peak, Mrs. Carter made one more phone call. She didn't shout, she didn't demand, she just stepped back into her car, rolled up the window, and dialed a number labeled simply, D.C. office. 3 rings, then a voice. Judge Carter. The man answered, instantly formal. Everything all right? She smiled faintly. Just a minor misunderstanding here in Eastwood. I need you to get in touch with Director Sloan. There was a pause. Yes, ma'am, right away. Within 45 minutes, the mayor's office had received a call, then the governor, then the Department of Justice. Because Judge Eloise Carter wasn't just retired. She had spent the last 10 years consulting on civil rights enforcement for the Office of the Inspector General. She had personally helped draft reforms on police accountability in 6 states. And she wasn't just here in Eastwood to visit her bank. She had been quietly reviewing the entire Eastwood Police Department under a sealed federal initiative targeting racial profiling in small-town jurisdictions. Lorman just stepped into a national spotlight, and the spotlight was blistering. News trucks arrived the next day. CNN, MSNBC, even local Fox affiliates lined up on Pine Street. The video had gone viral, shared by the bakery owner's daughter, who posted it with the caption, "My grandma's friend got screamed at by a rookie cop." Then he found out who she really was. 3.2 million views in under 12 hours. By the time Officer Lorman realized what was happening, it was too late. His name had been printed in the headlines. Rookie cop suspended after berating retired judge. Federal probe revealed. The clip of him yelling, "You people," was everywhere. On the morning show, a panel of retired judges replayed it frame by frame. But what nobody saw coming was the press conference. 3 days later, in front of the Eastwood Municipal Building, Judge Carter stepped up to the podium. No security detail. No fancy suit, just a white blouse, pearl earrings, and a voice as steady as stone. She looked out at the crowd. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Judge Eloise May Carter. I've lived in Eastwood for 77 years. I've served under 4 presidents, and I still believe in justice." Flashbulbs popped. Reporters leaned in. She continued, I came here under a federal program to quietly observe and report on disparities in law enforcement. I wanted to believe this town had changed, that after everything we fought for in the 60s, our children could walk these streets with dignity. She paused, then turned toward the building behind her. But last Thursday, I was reminded we still have work to do. A hush fell over the crowd. Then she dropped the twist. I've submitted my findings. And as of this morning, the Department of Justice is opening a formal investigation into Eastwood PD's traffic enforcement and racial stop data, effective immediately. Gasps, shock, cheers. Sergeant Mullen stood nearby, watching everything. She didn't smile, but she nodded once, slowly. Judge Carter wasn't finished. This is not about revenge. This is about responsibility. She gestured toward the crowd, at the teenagers, the elders, the business owners, the people who had watched it all happen. It's about teaching those in power that titles don't protect you from consequences. And it's about reminding them, especially the young men with badges, that the people they disrespect may just be the very ones sent to evaluate them. That line, it went viral again. And Lorman, he tried to deny it all. He posted on Facebook calling it a setup, claimed he was tricked, said he didn't know. But screenshots, video, witnesses, DOJ records. Truth doesn't care about denial. By the end of the week, he was under federal review for misconduct. By the end of the month, he was officially dismissed from the department. And Eastwood? It began to change. Checkpoints were removed. Officers retrained. Mullins was promoted to acting chief. And every Thursday morning, at the same parking spot outside Jefferson Bank, a reserve sign was placed. Reserved, Judge E.M. Carter. Sometimes she parked there. Sometimes she didn't. But the space was never empty. It happened on a Monday, a warm spring afternoon in Eastwood. The town square was buzzing, not with protests, not with outrage, but with something else entirely. Reckoning. The Eastwood Town Council had called a special public meeting. Local press lined the walls. Citizens packed the seats, some standing shoulder to shoulder in the back. At the front, a single empty chair. That chair belonged to Officer Jake Lorman. He'd been called to testify before the council to address not just his actions that Thursday morning, but also a pattern of conduct uncovered by the DOJ review. 5 complaints, 3 internal warnings, 2 stop and search violations, 1 suspension, the final straw. And now, he sat there, suit too tight, hands clenched in his lap, sweat forming at the back of his neck as the mayor read the findings aloud. Across the room, seated near the front, was Judge Carter. She didn't gloat. She didn't blink. She simply watched, quietly, deliberately, as justice did what justice was always meant to do. After the mayor concluded, Lorman was asked if he wanted to speak. He stood slowly, cleared his throat. "I was trying to do my job," he said. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone. I just didn't know who she was." The mayor lowered her glasses. "And that's precisely the issue. You, officer, you didn't know, and you didn't care." The council voted unanimously. Jake Lorman's badge was permanently revoked. He would never serve in law enforcement again. Not in Eastwood, not anywhere. But the final word? That belonged to Judge Carter. She was invited to the podium by the mayor herself. As she stood, the room rose with her. Not out of obligation, out of reverence. She approached the microphone and waited for silence. She didn't have to wait long. "When I was 16, she began, I watched my father get pulled from his truck by 2 men with badges. They never apologized. No one believed him. That moment shaped the rest of my life." She looked at Lorman. But this time, the world saw it. The world believed me. She turned to the council. "And now we change. Not because one man failed, but because an entire system watched and did nothing until it was forced to." Applause, standing, tears, and then her final words. The same 5 words that had stopped Lorman cold the first time. She looked directly at him, eyes firm, voice low. "Now you know, carry on." And this time he didn't say a word, didn't argue, didn't look up, just sat there silent, as the town that once looked away finally chose to look inward. Outside, the reserved parking space was still there, clean white letters painted fresh. And across from it, in the bakery window, a handwritten sign hung beneath a photo of Judge Carter and the baker. Dignity is power. She didn't seek revenge. She demanded respect. And in doing so, She didn't just change one man. She changed an entire town. Have you ever witnessed someone being disrespected simply because others assumed they were powerless? What would you have done differently if you knew their truth? Tell us in the comments, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one writing the rules.